What we'd like to talk with you about is really the issue that on Atlantic Avenue in the resort, the crowd size is growing in the late night. That's really the issue that we're focusing on here. And with that growth in the crowd size, we really feel like we need to take some reasonable steps in order to keep the situation manageable. So what we'll be doing is asking the council for some support on the idea of closing the current 3 parking facilities, the 9th Street garage, the 18th Street and 19th Street parking lots, and the 25th Street parking lots, to close them to new entrants at midnight, whereas currently they're not closed to new entrants until 2 a.m. Let me first state what the safety concerns are as they've been expressed by the police department. We have a number of police representatives, including Captain Free from the 2nd Precinct, that can answer your more specific questions. But the issues that they've articulated are fairly simple. First is that the sidewalks are becoming too crowded, that there is a problem with that congestion causing friction between people, and that friction gets even worse in a time period around 1:30 a.m. when the bars let out and that many more people are added to the sidewalk. As a result of that, what we end up with is the sidewalks end up spilling out onto the streets, so that there's the issue of the safety of the pedestrians, and it also causes some congestion with the traffic. One thing that we could do to help reduce the size of the crowds late at night is to close the parking lots, the city parking lots that we control. We could close them earlier to prevent the people that come in quite late at night, at least after midnight. And there was a lot of discussion as to what time that should be: 10 p.m., midnight, 2 a.m., 1 a.m. And the thought was that a reasonable compromise at this point would be to look to a midnight closing of new entrants to those lots. I think we all know the old Gary Larson cartoon, The Far Side, and everybody's favorite was the picture of that one deer that had a bullseye on its side that said, "Oh, bummer of a birthmark." But this presentation falls under that category as well. I've got the birthmark on me these days.
I support the manager and the police department. One thing we did learn from the horrendous weekend of 1989 was if we didn't have a mix in the crowd of ages, if it were all one age, that tended to present opportunities, and that's why we went to work to bring families back down to the ocean front. And if families don't feel comfortable or safe trying to maneuver from a puppet show to go back to their hotel, put their children to bed and to have their peace and quiet, or the homeowners that we hear from, this is where I think the police and the manager are coming from, so that our guests are always welcome there, as long as they don't present some type of an impediment to people who just want to use the streets to walk on.
My concern is, 1 foot in the door is usually followed by a 2nd foot in the door, and we really don't pay attention to the people that are being affected, that we say, let's grab the low-hanging fruit and say we did something. My honest opinion, it's not going to solve the problem.
We're suggesting that this, well, first of all, this can be done administratively, and frankly, the parking operations in the Convention and Visitors Bureau has been handling these kind of things administratively. What we're asking you to do is to give us your accedance to us taking these administrative steps to implement the early closing in these lots. Doesn't require council action, but we'd like to know that the council had support, that we had support from the council, I should say, and that at least we put something out 2 weeks ago ahead of time for you, so that you'd have some indication that this was going to be coming today. And with that, let me...
Thank you. Mr. Villanueva.
Thank you, Mayor. But Mayor, on the CUP, aren't the existing businesses that we're trying to target, aren't they grandfathered in the
Yes.
CUP?
The problem that we had with police resources was mean that we would have officers coming to work at 6 and routinely working till 6 the following morning, pretty much every weekend night.
Right.
And the plan was that at 2:30 we would close the parking so that crowd would leave, and that actually did work. And you can go back and look at the statistical information. And I can tell you from the police response, I don't have walk and beat officers out there till 6 in the morning anymore, ever. By 3 o'clock at night, we can all go home. And although I don't mind having them out there occasionally till 6 in the morning, one of the problems we were running into was we were exhausting our resources because we were requiring them to work 12 and 13 and 15-hour days as a matter of routine. And that needed to be avoided. I mean, it just was exhausting our resources. So and this is where that came from. This moderation of the parking was based on, hey, the last time we had a crowd problem, the moderation of the parking had a very positive impact. And it did send a signal to everyone, it's time to go home. The evaluation would involve all the stakeholders because we're going to get input from everyone. I don't think the fact that 31st Street closes early has hurt Catch 31 at all. Now, Catch 31 has a real good way to be in that they are a destination. I mean, people come specifically down to the beachfront to go there.
Don't we have ordinances in place such as loitering, curfews, those kind of mechanisms to help enforce crowd control in those particular areas, particularly where youth frequent, 17th Street and on Atlantic? And that's the crux of the issue. We've been talking about oceanfront behavior, and we've been talking about the entertainment district for a long time. We've been talking about the bar districts, and this is a recurring problem.
Yeah, actually, there is no loitering ordinances that exist anymore. The Supreme Court ruled many years ago that loitering is not enforceable. It violates the Constitution, and that has taken care of any loitering ordinances now. As for the curfew, this crowd, for the most part, is not underage. They're older than 18. They're a young crowd. I mean, as compared to me, they're young. But they're 18 to 25. There's some 17-year-olds in there, and we do take care of the curfew violators that we find, as a matter of course. However, this crowd is not, or tends not to be, that young. If you look at the problem in New Orleans, they packed them all into a football stadium with nothing to do, and they had lots of problems. I think it's rare, and I certainly don't think it's something we should do as a matter of course. As a matter of fact, we're set up not to do that. That violates the tenets of community policing. And we're basing that on a historical look at the RPP program. And that was adopted with some controversy. However, it has been a very successful program at keeping the partygoers, the partiers, out of the neighborhoods where people are trying to sleep. And we are very robust in our enforcement of that, and the crowd knows that. I mean, they collectively as a group know if you go into the residences, you stand a pretty good chance of getting your car tagged and towed, so it becomes a financial decision for them. And I think that program, because it's so robust and has been so successful, I think that would keep people out of the neighborhoods, because the crowd does know what they can do and what they can't do.
What June showed us is after midnight, we're bringing in about 250 cars on a relatively busy night. Assuming that the summer gets a little busier, it might bump up to 300.
After what time did you say, Charles?
This would be after midnight.
After midnight.
There's quite a few more before midnight, but we've been watching the times from 10 p.m. to 11 p.m. and each hour segment. So after midnight, the time period that we're proposing, it's about 250 cars been coming in. Maybe that jumps up to 300. These folks are great carpoolers. VDOT could use them as an example. We're anticipating it could be 3 or 4 people per vehicle. And so you could be in the ballpark of 1,000 people that could be impacted.
Academic studies that support this, including by the Department of Justice, that will tell you an area of concern, and this is what we're really addressing, is large groups of youths clustered together with nothing to do. And they may have nothing to do by choice. In other words, they choose not to go into the shops and into the restaurants, or they may not go because they just don't. They can't. They're too young. So you got to be 21, and they're old enough to be out, but not old enough to be in an establishment. But if you look at a lot of the studies, and this was some of the things that gave us concern, one of the things that we focused on and looked at was these large groups of youth packed together, violating their personal spaces. They don't know each other, and they have nothing to do. And most of the people that do that kind of analysis will tell you that those are things you need to be concerned about when you have that. And if the crowd gets big enough of youths that don't have anything to do, you can have some problems. And I think that's what this is about. Yeah, it's not not to come down here. It's, we don't want them to come down here in such large numbers that we create public safety issues. And that is a fine line because it's a public place. And obviously, it's not illegal to simply be in a public place, nor should it ever be. But I think what we want to do is we want to moderate the crowd so that it doesn't cause these other issues.